Why was everyone ignoring the silence that afternoon? The kind of silence that only came before things went bad. The air over Kandahar shimmered heavy, vibrating, alive. You could taste the heat. Dust floated like smoke, sticking to every inch of skin, every breath. Sergeant Eva Rostova sat alone on an overturned ammo can outside the aid tent, field stripping her M4 with the same calm, methodical rhythm she used to keep her thoughts from breaking apart. Every click of metal was a heartbeat. Every spring, every bolt, another way to hold back the ghosts. Sweat rolled down her temple, cutting a clean line through the grime. Her face didn't move, not when the laughter echoed across the compound, not when a door slammed near the barracks. She just kept cleaning. The quiet was her armor, and armor was the only thing that kept people from seeing how much she still shook inside. From the MRAP nearby, a young voice broke through the hum of the generators. "You think it can get any hotter, Sarge?" Specialist Jessica Miller, barely 20, leaned out the door, her freckled face flushed pink under the Afghan sun. Eva didn't look up. "If it does," she said softly, "even the devil's gonna ask for shade." Miller laughed, light, nervous, like someone still trying to fit humor into a place that didn't deserve it. Eva didn't join in. She just ran a cloth through the barrel, slow and steady. The medic's ritual wasn't about cleaning, it was about control. Because in war, control was an illusion, but pretending to have it kept you sane. Evening came slow, burning the horizon into gold. The heat faded, but the stillness stayed. Kandahar always had its own rhythm at dusk. Generators hummed like tired hearts, flags cracked against their poles, and from somewhere beyond the wire came the faint, haunting sound of a call to prayer drifting across the desert wind. Eva liked that sound. It meant the world was still out there, broken maybe, but still alive. She sat with her aid bag open beside her, reorganizing it for the third time that night. 32 years old, 3 deployments. Army medic, daughter of a small-town nurse from Minnesota. Calm under fire, efficient, unshakable. That's what they all said. But no one saw the way her hands trembled after dark. No one saw how she still woke with her boots half on, expecting the next siren. She'd built walls, polite ones, around her cot, around her heart. Cross them, and you'd be turned away with a smile that meant don't. A shadow passed in front of her. Miller again, helmet off, blonde hair tucked under her cap, holding 2 lukewarm bottles of water. She plopped down beside the sergeant. "Figured you'd forget to hydrate again," she said. Eva took the bottle without looking up. "Figured you'd keep track." That was affection in their language, quiet, practical, unspoken. "You really go through that thing every night?" Miller asked, nodding at the aid bag. "Every night," Eva replied, snapping a tourniquet open and shut. "You don't wait until you need something to find out it's not there." Miller smiled faintly. "Guess that's why they call you Ice Queen." "Better ice than ash," Eva said. Across the compound, soldiers from Alpha Company leaned against a Humvee, tossing jokes into the air. "Hey, Miller," one called, "you learning how to knit in there, or is she teaching you how to frown professionally?" Laughter. Miller flushed, forcing a grin. "Maybe she's teaching me how not to talk as much as you, Corporal." More laughter, this time at his expense. Eva didn't defend her. She didn't need to. "You learned quickly here. The best way to command respect was to act like you didn't need it." When the voices faded, Miller asked quietly, "You ever get used to it, the teasing?" Eva sealed another bandage. "Sure, first it annoys you, then it doesn't, then you stop hearing it." Miller frowned. "Guess I'm still on step 1. "Good," Eva said softly, "means you still care." For a moment, the silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was peace, the kind that felt like a breath you didn't know you'd been holding. Then the radio hissed. Unconfirmed movement south of the village. Possible vehicle activity near checkpoint 4. Eva froze mid-motion. The tone in her shoulders changed, subtle but immediate. Miller caught it. "You think it's something." "Could be," Eva murmured. "Could be nothing." She zipped her aid bag shut. But in this place, nothing doesn't last long. The last light slipped behind the hills, turning the mountains into jagged silhouettes. Somewhere beyond the barriers, an engine started, then another. Convoy prepping. Eva listened, eyes scanning the horizon, her fingers absently tracing the scars on her rifle stock. That's when Miller saw it, that flicker across her face. Memory, regret, the kind that never left. She'd heard rumors about what happened on Eva's last deployment. A mission that went bad, people who didn't come home. But she never asked. Because everyone out here had something they didn't talk about. Night dropped fast, floodlights flickered on. The base turned ghostly blue under the artificial glow. Eva stood, stretching her back. "Get some rest, Miller. You're on standby tomorrow." "Yeah," Miller asked. "Something coming?" Eva didn't answer right away. Her eyes were still locked on the ridgeline, the dark shapes against darker sky. "War always comes back," she said finally. "It just waits until you start to breathe again." The radio erupted. "Contact, VBIED at checkpoint 4, multiple casualties." Miller's headset slid halfway on before Eva even spoke. "Gear up, we're rolling." The calm shattered into motion. Engines roared, boots hit gravel, orders cracked through the night. Eva's rifle was already slung across her shoulder. Her aid bag snapped shut and hauled up by the strap. The quiet that had hung over the base all day was gone, replaced by a violent kind of purpose. "QRF-TAC channel. Guardian 2 ready. Medevac on standby." Miller's hand shook once as she climbed into the driver's seat, then steadied. Fear turned into focus. Eva's voice came calm through the headset. "Convoy laid, this is Guardian 2, moving to checkpoint 4. Copy that, confirm VBIED detonation. Possible secondary devices, proceed with caution." The MRAP jolted forward. The barriers opened and they thundered into the night. Dust rose in a wave behind them. Inside the armored cabin, the air was thick with heat and adrenaline. Eva whispered under her breath, almost like prayer. "Massive hemorrhage, airway, respiration, circulation, hypothermia." The medic's creed, her mental armor. "Stop the bleed, clear the breath, keep them alive." Outside, Afghanistan blurred past, mud walls, scattered lights, children standing barefoot at doorways watching the convoy rip through their village. Ahead, a column of black smoke clawed into the night sky. Miller's throat tightened. "Sarge, if it's still hot when we get there." "Then we run faster," Eva said. "No hesitation." They tore across the desert road, past the shadows of compounds and watchtowers. Every bump rattled the metal in their bones. Over the radio. Multiple KIA. Sniper fire suspected on the ridge. "Guardian 2 copies," Eva responded. "ETA 4 minutes." Miller caught her breath. 4 minutes. "Plenty of time to make a difference," Eva said quietly. The checkpoint appeared over the rise, or what was left of it. A crater, fire, pieces of vehicles scattered like bones. Miller whispered, "Oh God." "Eyes up," Eva snapped. "Keep it steady." The moment the MRAP screeched to a halt, the rear ramp slammed down. "Ramp," Eva shouted, and jumped before it even hit the dirt. The world outside was chaos. Smoke, fire, screaming. The smell of diesel, blood, and dust so thick you could taste it. "Medic over here," someone shouted. Eva sprinted toward the voice, her boots crunching glass, her mind already in triage mode. A soldier crawled from the wreckage, one leg dragging behind him. She dropped beside him, eyes scanning fast. Arterial bleed, partial detachment, pale skin. "Tourniquet, twist, tighten." "Stay with me," she murmured. "You're not dying here." Behind her, Miller's voice crackled through the radio. Sniper fire from the ridge, North Ridge. Copy, Eva yelled. Cover fire now. The MRAP's turret roared to life. The .50 cal thundered deep, relentless, shaking the air itself. Brass shells poured down the side like rain. Eva barely noticed. She was already crawling to the next body. 2 soldiers down, 1 gone, 1 breathing shallow. Airway blocked. She cleared it with her gloved hand, pressed gauze into a chest wound. Line to medevac now. Already on it, Miller's voice came firm now. 4 critical, 1 urgent surgical, sniper still active. Good, Eva muttered. That's our kind of chaos. A bullet cracked the dirt near her boot. She didn't flinch. She just shifted her body, shielding the wounded man with her own. Miller saw it from the turret, her sergeant kneeling in the open, smoke swirling, bullets snapping through the air. Something inside Miller broke open, fear, burned away by something stronger. She slammed her hand on the trigger, unleashing another storm of fire across the ridge. Each tracer round that cut through the haze was a promise. You're not alone, Sarge. Under that thunder, Eva's voice stayed calm. Breathe, soldier. Come on, stay with me. The man gasped, blood bubbling at his lips. She pressed harder. You're not going anywhere, not today. Then silence. Not peace, just the pause between battles. The kind of silence that meant the war was taking a breath. Eva exhaled slowly, feeling her pulse slam in her ears. Medevac inbound in 8 minutes, the radio said. 8 minutes? She whispered, we can hold 8. Smoke curled upward into the desert sky. The fire painted her face in red and gold. And in that ruin, amid all that death, she didn't look like a soldier or a savior. She looked like someone who refused to run. Why didn't she run when everyone else did? The question echoed somewhere far behind the noise, a whisper buried under gunfire and smoke. Sergeant Eva Rostova knelt in the open, the world breaking around her. The air shimmered with heat and gunpowder. The earth itself trembled from the percussion of heavy fire, yet she didn't move. Her gloved hands pressed down hard on the soldier beneath her, blood soaking through the fabric until it burned hot against her skin. Come on, Lieutenant, you're not going out like this. His name tag read WILLIMS. His breath was shallow, his uniform shredded, his leg half gone. His voice rasped, leave me, get the others. Eva shook her head once. Not my kind of order, sir. She pulled a tourniquet high on his thigh, twisting it until the blood stopped pooling. The motion was mechanical, practiced, unflinching. Each movement came from instinct, not thought. She'd done this 100 times, but this one felt different. The air was thick with that smell, metal, fuel, and something human. Behind her, the MRAP's gunner poured fire into the ridge line, suppressing the unseen sniper whose shots had pinned down half the team. Brass shells rained across the dirt, catching the fatting light like falling embers. Guardian 2, Sitrep, a voice barked through the radio. Eva keyed her mic with blood-streaked fingers. Multiple wounded, 1 critical, 1 urgent. Sniper fire still active, requesting medevac priority 1. Static answered, then copy that, medevac en route, 8 minutes out. 8 minutes? 8 minutes could feel like forever out here. She checked William's pulse again, faint but there. The lieutenant's eyes fluttered, unfocused. You're going to be fine, she said softly. He gave a weak smile. Should have run, Sarge. I don't run, she said. I fix. Another round cracked. The bullet slammed into the wreckage behind her, sending shards of metal flying. She ducked but didn't retreat. Instead, she leaned over the lieutenant, shielding him with her own body. Stay with me, sir, she murmured. You're not dying in this dust. Inside the MRAP, Miller was shouting over the radio, adrenaline in her voice. Contact North Ridge, confirmed muzzle flashes at 30 degrees. Eva's voice came back, calm as ice. Suppress and hold. The heavy .50 cal spun toward the direction of the flashes. Miller slammed her palm on the trigger. The gun roared to life, deep, thunderous, shaking the ground beneath her boots. Tracer rounds cut through the haze, carving red lines across the ridge. The recoil rocked the vehicle. Spent casings cascaded down like gold rain. Every burst was a heartbeat, every shot a shield over her sergeant. Through the turret camera, Miller saw her, Eva, kneeling in the open, smoke swirling around her like storm clouds, still working, still calm. She was framed against the fire and the dust, her silhouette caught between life and death. Something inside Miller shifted. That kind of courage, it wasn't loud. It didn't shout or pose. It just did. "Hold that fire," someone yelled through the radio. Miller ignored them, not until she's safe. Eva didn't look up. Her world had narrowed to the man beneath her hands. She threaded an IV line into a vein slick with blood. Her fingers trembled once, then steadied. "Pressure's weak," she whispered. "We're not losing you." She turned to the two soldiers crouched nearby. "I need hands, one on his shoulders, one on the leg. Lift on my mark." They nodded wide-eyed, young. "Now." They heaved, dragging Williams toward the MRAP as bullets snapped overhead. "Keep him elevated. Don't let that line tangle," Eva barked, her voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. When they reached the vehicle, Miller shouted from inside, "Ramp open." The steel door slammed down with a metallic clang. Eva climbed in backward, still holding the IV, still watching the lieutenant's face. "Get him secured," she ordered. "High thigh tourniquet, keep pressure on the wound." One of the medics nodded, taking over. Eva slumped back against the armor, chest heaving. Outside, the gunfire tapered off, not peace, just exhaustion. The sniper had gone quiet, or maybe Miller's barrage had found him. Either way, silence filled the spaces between the flames. Through the cracked viewport, Miller's voice came again. "Sniper's quiet, ridge looks clear." Eva keyed her mic. "Good work, don't relax, he might be moving." She looked back at Williams. His breathing was shallow but steady, his skin pale, lips cracked. He was alive. That was victory enough. For a medic, saving even one was the same as saving the world. She let herself breathe just once, then she looked toward the ridge. The smoke moved like ghosts. Nothing stirred, but the quiet wasn't peace. It never was. "Medevac inbound in 5, Miller said. Eva nodded slowly, plenty of time. But then, faint beneath the crackle of fire, another sound. A voice, weak, muffled, human. "Help, please." Eva turned, the corporal beside her frowned. "Sarge, you hear that?" "Yeah." She grabbed her rifle, slinging it across her chest. "Someone's still out there." Command said hold position until. "I said someone's still out there." Before he could argue, she was already moving back into the smoke, boots crunching glass and debris. Her aid bag slammed against her side as she climbed over the shattered remains of a barrier. The heat hit her like a wave, but she kept going. "Hey," the corporal shouted after her. "It's getting dark." Eva didn't answer. She ducked under a fallen section of wall, her flashlight beam slicing through the haze. "Talk to me," she called. "Where are you?" A cough, faint, close. She followed it to a collapsed guard tower. Beneath a sheet of torn canvas, she found him. An Afghan interpreter, barely 20, one arm pinned under a steel beam. Blood pooled beneath him, mixing with the dust. His chest rose in shallow, ragged breaths. "Hey, hey, stay still," Eva said softly, switching to the few words of Dari she'd picked up. "You're safe, I'm here." His eyes flickered open, glassy with pain. "Friend, American friend." "That's right," she said, "friend." She gritted her teeth and pushed at the beam. It didn't budge. She dropped to her knees, braced her shoulder, and shoved again, harder. Metal scraped stone. The beam shifted just enough for her to drag his arm free. He screamed once, then went limp. Stay with me, she murmured. She checked his pulse. Weak, but there. Chest wound, entry left side. She tore open a chest seal, pressed it down tight. Her hands were shaking now, exhaustion finally catching up, but she forced them steady. Miller, she hissed into the radio. I've got one more survivor, local interpreter, critical, needs stretcher team now. Roger that, Sarge, came Miller's voice, distant but firm. Sending two your way. Minutes later, the corporal appeared with two soldiers, their faces streaked with soot. They lifted the interpreter carefully, Eva guiding the IV line, whispering to the boy the whole time. You hang on, brother, you did your job, we'll do ours. The fires glowed red against the coming night. Smoke curled around them as they carried the stretcher back toward the clearing. Above it all came a faint sound, a rhythm at first mistaken for wind. Then it grew louder. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Medevac inbound. Miller, Eva called, signal the bird. Copy, 3 clicks out. Eva dropped to one knee, pulling a flare from her vest. With a sharp twist, she ignited it, a burst of red light cutting through the smoke. She raised it high, waving in slow arcs. The helicopter's lights broke through the haze moments later. Blackhawk low and fast. The wind hit them like a wall, kicking up dust and flame. Let's move. They sprinted toward the landing zone, crouching under the storm of dust. The helicopter settled, side doors already open, medics waving. Bring them in, let's go. First came Williams, limp, pale but alive. Eva climbed halfway inside, shouting over the roar. Tourniquet high on left thigh, IV secure, blood pressure low. The flight medic nodded, hauling the stretcher in. We got him, who else? Eva turned back. Interpreter, gunshot chest, needs decompression kit as soon as you're clear. They loaded him next, careful and quick. The rotors screamed overhead, wind ripping at their uniforms. Dust stung their faces. Bird full, one of the medics shouted. One more seat. Eva shook her head. Get them home, that's an order. You sure, Sergeant? They go first. She stepped back, signaling with 2 firm taps on the side of the helicopter. Go. The Blackhawk lifted into the air, slicing through the storm of its own making. The ground shook beneath the downdraft. For a second, Eva saw Williams raise a weak hand through the open door. Maybe a wave, maybe just a twitch. She didn't wave back. She just watched, until the light disappeared into the night. Until the sound faded to nothing but a heartbeat. Then crack. A sniper's round tore through the haze, striking dirt 5 feet from her boots. Another whistled past her ear. Contact ridge, someone shouted. Eva dropped to one knee, rifle up. Miller, eyes on. Got him, North Ridge, 30 degrees right of the wreck. The turret spun. The .50 cal screamed to life again, shaking the earth. Tracer fire lit up the sky like lightning. The sniper's shot stopped, swallowed by the storm. When the gun fell silent again, the air was still. The only sound was the crackle of dying fires. Eva stood slowly, chest rising and falling, her gloves blackened, her face streaked with soot and blood. She keyed her mic, ridge clear. Miller's reply came through, shaky but proud. Copy that, Sarge. Eva looked toward the horizon. The Blackhawk was just a speck now, blinking against the stars. She exhaled, long, slow, human. Then she whispered, half to herself, half to the war. You hold the line until someone breaks. Today it wasn't us. Why did the silence feel louder than the gunfire? The smoke had stopped rising hours ago, but its smell still clung to everything, the ground, the air, even the skin. Checkpoint 4 was no longer a battlefield. It was a graveyard that hadn't decided who it belonged to yet. The fires had burned out. The night had bled into dawn, and for the first time since the explosion, the desert was still. Sergeant Eva Rostova stood alone amid the wreckage, her boots half buried in the dirt, eyes fixed on the blackened skeleton of what used to be a Humvee. The heat had twisted its metal into something unrecognizable. The wind moved through it, making a sound like whispering, as if the ghosts were trying to speak. Behind her, the MRAP idled, its engine rumbling low. Miller leaned against the turret, helmet off, hair matted with sweat and soot. Her fingers trembled around the radio handset, but her voice stayed steady. Command Guardian 2, checkpoint secure. 2 medevac successful, multiple KIA remaining, area cooling down. Static, then a reply. Copy that, Guardian 2, reinforcements inbound, hold position. Hold position. 2 words that always sounded easier than they felt. Eva's gaze drifted across the scorched landscape, the twisted HESCO barriers, the crater where the checkpoint once stood, the dark patches on the earth that weren't shadows. The smell was a mix of burned diesel and iron, blood, smoke, memory. She exhaled slowly, feeling the weight settle back into her chest, heavier now that the adrenaline was gone. Her gloves were torn, her sleeves stiff with dried blood, some hers, most not. Her heartbeat, once a hammer, now felt slow and uneven. The quiet always did that, made her remember she was human. Miller jumped down from the MRAP and walked toward her, stepping carefully around the debris. She stopped a few feet away, her voice hesitant. Sarge, command says we can stand down. Eva nodded once but didn't turn. Copy. Miller waited for something else, an order, a word, anything. But Eva just kept staring. The younger soldier followed her gaze and saw what she was looking at, the spot where Lieutenant Williams had lain. The sand was still wet there, a discarded tourniquet half buried nearby. The imprint of a stretcher. Miller swallowed. They'll make it right, the lieutenant and the interpreter. Eva's voice came quiet, flat. If the birds made it to Bagram in time, yeah, maybe. Maybe. It wasn't the word Miller wanted to hear, but it was the only one soldiers trusted. Yes was for lies. Maybe was for people who'd seen the truth. For a long time, neither spoke. The wind brushed across the sand, carrying the faint scent of cordite and the distant sound of rotors far off in the mountains. Miller finally asked, "How do you do it? Go out there like that? I saw you kneel in the open. You didn't even flinch." Eva tilted her head slightly, as if considering the question. "You stop thinking about what can happen to you. You think about what you can still do for them. That's the only way you move." "That's not bravery," Miller said softly. "That's something else." Eva's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Yeah, it's habit." They both turned as the sound of engines grew louder. Reinforcements, a convoy of armored trucks rolling in from the north. The first vehicle stopped short of the crater. Soldiers jumped down, scanning the area. One of them, a captain, spotted Eva and jogged over. "Sergeant Rostova, your Guardian 2. She nodded. "Hell of a job holding this place," he said, glancing around at the devastation. "Intel says you neutralized at least one shooter, got 2 criticals out alive. That's solid work." Eva just nodded again, her face unreadable. "Go regroup with your team," the captain added. "We'll take it from here." She didn't move. "There are still bodies out there." "We'll handle recovery," he said. "You've done your part." She finally looked at him. Her eyes were calm but cold. "No one's done until everyone's home." He hesitated, realizing there was no point arguing. He just nodded, gave a small salute and turned back to his men. Miller waited until he was gone, then said quietly, "You really don't stop, do you?" Eva's voice softened. "If you stop, you start thinking, and thinking gets loud." Together they walked the perimeter, checking every corner, marking coordinates for recovery. The sun was climbing now, washing the valley in light. The fire-scorched earth turned amber, and the broken glass sparkled like something trying to be beautiful again. A bird flew low overhead, its shadow passing over the crater. For a split second, it looked like the shadow of the Blackhawk from hours ago, the same sound, the same heartbeat. By the time the reinforcements had secured the area, the medics from Guardian 2 were back in their vehicle. The ramp shut with a dull clang, sealing out the wind. Inside, the cabin smelled of smoke, metal, and the faint antiseptic tang of the aid bag. Eva sat on the bench, elbows on her knees, staring at the floor. The rhythm of the engine beneath them was steady, hypnotic. Miller sat across from her, helmet in her lap. Neither spoke for the first few miles. It was always like that after. The silence wasn't awkward. It was the only thing that didn't sound wrong. Miller finally broke it. "You think he'll write about it, the lieutenant?" Eva blinked. "Write about what?" "What you did, what we did." Eva's eyes drifted toward the window, toward the vast stretch of desert rolling by. "They don't write songs about medics," she said. "We don't fit the melody." Miller frowned. "That's not right." Eva shrugged. "Doesn't have to be. We're not here for songs." The MRAP hit a bump, jolting both of them. Eva steadied herself with one hand on the wall. Her knuckles were raw, skin split open. Miller noticed and reached into her pouch. "Here," she said, handing her a wipe. "You should clean that." Eva stared at it for a second, then gave a small, weary smile. "Look at you, trying to mother me now." Miller smiled back. "Guess it's contagious." The rest of the ride was quiet. Outside, the desert stretched endless and pale under the morning sun, the kind of beauty that only existed in places built from loss. By the time they rolled back into the forward base, the engines were hot, the smell of diesel thick. Soldiers were already gathered at the gate, waiting to debrief the returning team. The war didn't pause for anyone, not even for medics. Eva climbed down first. Her legs felt heavy, her uniform stiff. Miller followed close, blinking against the sudden brightness. The noise of the base, shouting, engines, radios, hit them like a wave after the long silence. Inside the aid station, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Everything felt too clean, too bright. Eva dropped her pack on the metal table, unzipped it, and started sorting. Bandages, IVs, tourniquets, wipes, each piece cleaned, replaced, folded. It was muscle memory now, her way of washing away the chaos. Miller leaned against the doorway, watching her. "You really do that every time?" Eva didn't look up. "Every time. Even when you're dead tired?" "Especially then." Miller hesitated, then said, "I don't get it." "You will," Eva said. For a moment, Miller just stood there, unsure what to do with her hands. The fluorescent light flickered slightly. It made everything feel slower, like time itself had stopped to watch her. Then softly, "You scared me out there." Eva glanced up, one eyebrow raised. "How that?" "When you went back for the interpreter, you didn't even think. You just moved. I thought we were going to lose you." Eva's voice stayed low, steady. "You don't measure your worth by how safe you stay. You measure it by who still breathes when you're done." Miller exhaled, nodding slowly. "Guess that's the difference between training and war." Eva gave a faint smirk. "War doesn't train you, it reveals you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy, true, unfixable. Miller looked down at her hands, picking at the edge of her glove. "You ever get used to it? The blood, the noise, the faces." Eva paused, then said quietly, "You don't get used to it. You just learn which memories you let stay loud." The room fell quiet again. Only the faint hum of the generator filled the space. Eva folded the last of the gauze, sealed her pack, and set it aside. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished steel, tired eyes, dust on her cheek, a faint scar by her jaw she didn't remember getting. Then she said softly, almost to herself, "Sometimes courage isn't loud. Sometimes it just breathes, one heartbeat at a time." Miller didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence that followed said everything. Outside, the sun was rising higher. The base was waking up. Somewhere, a convoy rumbled to life. The smell of instant coffee drifted faintly through the air. War didn't pause for heroes. It just continued. Eva reached for her helmet, ran her fingers over the scratches and dust that told the story she'd never say out loud. Then she looked at Miller, really looked. "You did good," she said simply. Miller blinked, caught off guard. "I just followed your lead." Eva shook her head. "No, you didn't freeze, that's what matters." Miller gave a small, unsteady smile. "You taught me that." Eva's tone softened. "No one teaches that, the world does." For a long moment, they just sat there, two soldiers on opposite sides of experience, bound by one night they'd never talk about again. Then Eva said quietly, "Get some rest, Miller. There'll be another call, there always is." Miller nodded. "You." Eva's hands moved automatically, cleaning the trauma shears again. "Eventually." Miller turned to go. At the door she paused, glancing back. "You ever think about what it means, saving people who'll go right back out there tomorrow?" Eva's eyes didn't leave her work. "Yeah," she said softly, "every day." "Does it ever feel pointless?" Eva looked up then, eyes calm, distant, honest. "No, because as long as one breath keeps going, it means the world hasn't given up yet." Why did the sunrise feel like a lie? The fires at Checkpoint 4 had burned themselves out by the time the horizon began to glow. Only smoke remained, slow, gray columns twisting into the pale morning sky like ghosts trying to find their way home. Sergeant Eva Rostova stepped outside the aid station, the cold biting at her face. The desert before dawn was always crueler than at noon, colder, emptier, honest. It stripped everything away. Rank, pride, fear, all of it. She stood there for a long time, hands in her pockets, staring at the line where the mountains met the light. The base was quiet, not peaceful, just tired. The kind of quiet that came after too much had been said, too much done. Somewhere a generator coughed to life. Somewhere else a soldier laughed too loudly, trying to remind himself he was still human. Eva's uniform was stiff with dried blood. Her gloves were cracked, her throat raw from smoke. But none of that bothered her. What bothered her was how still it was. Stillness always came with a price. She could still hear it, the sharp pop of sniper fire, the metallic scream of a bullet hitting armor, the breath of a man who refused to stop breathing just because death told him to. Those sounds never left. They just found new places to hide. The eastern ridge began to brighten. The first soft streaks of gold crept over the valley, catching the wire fences, glinting off the spent brass casings scattered near the motor pool. It was beautiful in that cruel way the world always was after it tried to destroy itself. She leaned against the hood of a Humvee, closing her eyes for a moment. The metal was cold under her palms. Her body ached, the kind of ache that came from hours of stillness in chaos. When she opened her eyes again, Miller was standing a few yards away, helmet tucked under her arm, hair tangled, eyes red. She hesitated before walking closer. "Didn't think you'd be up this early," she said. "I never went down," Eva replied. Miller nodded. "I couldn't sleep either." "No one really does after their first night like that," Eva said. "It's the noise," Miller whispered. "It's gone, but I still hear it." Eva gave a small, knowing smile. "It stays for a while. Then one day it doesn't go away at all. That's when you stop fighting it." They stood in silence, watching the dawn stretch across the desert. The sun slowly climbed, turning the smoke into gold. Miller finally said, "I called Bagram. The medevac made it." Eva turned her head slightly. "Both of them?" "Yeah, Lieutenant Williams is in surgery. The interpreter too. The doc said it was close." "Close is still alive," Eva said softly. Miller's lips curved in a faint smile. "You saved them." Eva didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on the horizon. "No, we bought them time. Sometimes that's all we get." The words hung in the air, fragile, honest. The kind of truth soldiers didn't say out loud unless they were sure no one else could hear. Behind them, the base was waking up. Soldiers moved like ghosts through the early light, their silhouettes framed against the rising sun. Some carried tools, others rifles, all of them carrying the same invisible weight. Eva reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a crushed cigarette, unlit, more habit than comfort. She rolled it between her fingers, staring at the paper, the dirt smudge on the side. She hadn't smoked in months, but every deployment she carried one. Just one. Not to use, just to remind herself she still could. Miller glanced at it. You smoke. Only when I forget why I stopped, Eva said, tucking it back away. Miller chuckled softly, then grew quiet again. You ever wonder why people like us end up here, doing this? Eva's gaze didn't shift, because someone has to. That's not really an answer. Eva looked at her then, eyes tired but clear. You'll understand when you lose someone and have to keep working like you didn't. Miller's jaw tightened. You already have, haven't you? Eva didn't reply. She didn't need to. The silence said enough. In the distance, the sound of helicopters began to rise again, a convoy heading out, blades slicing through the morning air. Eva watched them until they disappeared over the ridge. Every time a bird lifted off, part of her went with it, wondering who'd come back, who wouldn't. The medic's curse wasn't the blood, it wasn't even the loss, it was the remembering, the faces that stayed long after the body bags were zipped. Miller spoke softly. The captain asked me to write a report, said I should include details about your actions at the checkpoint. Eva arched a brow. My actions? He said you saved 2 lives under fire. That's not something they see every day. Eva's voice came flat. It's not something I did for credit. I know, Miller said quickly. It's just people should know. Eva looked back toward the dawn, her expression unreadable. People don't need to know, they just need to keep breathing. For a long time, the only sound was the wind moving through the wire. Then quietly, Miller said, You're not like anyone I've ever met in uniform. Eva gave a faint smile. Good, one of me's enough. Miller laughed under her breath just once, and for a fleeting second, it almost sounded normal. But then a shout carried across the compound. Incoming medevac, injured from convoy. The sound cut through the stillness like a knife. Miller's body went rigid. Another hit. Eva was already moving. Doesn't matter, grab your gear. The tiredness vanished. The ache vanished. It always did when the call came. Adrenaline filled the space where exhaustion had been. The two of them sprinted toward the aid station, boots slamming against gravel, hearts sinking to the rhythm of urgency. Inside, the hum of activity was immediate, stretchers laid out, IV lines prepped, instruments gleaming under harsh light. The medics moved in a practice chaos, each one knowing exactly how to fill the silence. 2 inbound, the radio crackled. 1 critical, 1 stable. Eva snapped on fresh gloves. Miller, vitals when they hit the ground, prep O2. Got it, Miller said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The helicopter's blades grew louder until they shook the walls. Then came the rush of dust as the medevac touched down. The doors burst open, soldiers carrying stretchers through the haze. Blood again, dust again, the cycle starting all over. Eva met them halfway, her voice sharp, clear. This one first. Arterial bleed, left arm, tourniquet high, move. Miller fell in beside her, eyes wide but focused. They worked in perfect rhythm, the same unspoken choreography they'd built under fire. The soldier on the table moaned, body jerking as they packed the wound. Eva's voice softened. Easy, you're safe now, we've got you. Her hands were calm, deliberate, the kind of calm that came only from someone who'd seen too much to be surprised anymore. When the bleeding slowed, she stepped back, stripping off her gloves. Her arms were streaked red again. Miller looked up at her, breath shaking. You don't even hesitate. Eva shook her head. You don't get to hesitate, not here. They worked for another hour before the chaos settled. The critical stabilized. The stable one joked weakly with a medic about losing a bet over who'd get hit next. The sound almost made Eva smile. When it was over, when the stretchers were cleared and the last patient sent to recovery, Eva leaned against the table and finally exhaled. The fatigue hit her all at once, heavy, crushing. Miller handed her a bottle of water. "You okay?" Eva gave a small, dry laugh. "Define okay." Miller smiled faintly. "Alive, maybe." "Then yeah," Eva said, "barely." For a moment they just stood there, both too drained to speak. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly above them. Then Miller asked, almost whispering, "Why'd you join, Sarge? I mean, what made you want to be a medic?" Eva looked down at her hands, cracked knuckles, bruised veins, faint lines of dried blood. "I didn't want to be one," she said after a long pause. "My mother was, small-town nurse back home. She used to say healing people was the only honest kind of power left. I didn't believe her, not until I saw what it meant to lose it." Miller frowned. "You lost someone." Eva's eyes darkened. "Yeah, someone who didn't wait for help." The younger soldier didn't press. Some questions in war didn't need answers, just space. Eva turned, staring at the tent flap fluttering in the warm wind. "You know what the hardest part of this job is?" Miller shook her head. "It's not the blood, it's not the screams. It's knowing that sometimes you do everything right and it's still not enough." Miller looked at her for a long time, then said softly, "But today it was." Eva's jaw flexed. Today was luck, tomorrow might not be. The words weren't cruel, they were just truth. Outside, the sun climbed higher, burning away the morning haze. The shadows stretched, long and thin, across the sand. And for a fleeting moment, it almost felt like peace. Not the kind that came from winning, but the kind that came from surviving long enough to see another sunrise. Eva closed her eyes and whispered, "Sometimes, that's all the miracle you get." Why did the nights feel heavier after saving someone? The day had faded into dust and quiet. Kandahar's sky turned a deep violet, stars cutting through the haze like old scars. The fires from Checkpoint 4 were long gone, but the smell, that mix of smoke, diesel, and something human, lingered, clinging to the base like memory. Inside the aid tent, the hum of the generator was the only sound left alive. Sergeant Eva Rostova sat on a folding chair, elbows on her knees, head down. Her gloves lay on the table beside her, stiff with dried blood, half turned inside out. Her aid bag sat open again, contents spread across the metal surface in perfect, obsessive order. She was cleaning it again. Gauze, scissors, tape, hemostats, all scrubbed, folded, aligned. It wasn't just habit anymore, it was survival. Every scrape of metal against metal was a heartbeat she could control. Every motion was a way to silence the noise in her head. Outside, faint laughter echoed from the motor pool, soldiers trying to pretend the world hadn't ended this morning. Someone played music on a tinny speaker. Another told a story too loud, too bright. That was how they survived, pretending the dust didn't remember. Eva glanced at the corner of the tent, where her rifle leaned against a crate. It was clean too, polished to a dull shine, but it wasn't the weapon she trusted, it was the bag beside it. A medic's weapon wasn't made of steel, it was made of seconds. She checked her watch, midnight. She hadn't slept since the explosion. The flap of the tent opened, and Miller stepped in quietly, carrying 2 mugs of instant coffee. Her face was softer in the dim light, young again for a moment, before the uniform hardened her edges. She handed 1 mug to Eva. "Black, I figured you don't do sugar." Eva took it, nodded once. "Good guess." Miller sat across from her, watching her clean another pair of trauma shears. "You still at it? Can't patch someone with dirty tools." Miller smiled faintly. "Even if it's 2 in the morning. Especially then." The silence stretched between them, comfortable in its own way. The kind of silence that only came after shared fear, after you'd both seen something you couldn't explain. Finally, Miller said, "You ever think about what happens after this? Like when it's over?" Eva paused, setting the shears down. "Over?" She almost laughed. "It doesn't end, it just moves somewhere else." "I mean when you go home." Eva took a sip of her coffee, grimaced at the taste. "Home's not the same after this." "Yeah, but don't you miss it?" Eva's eyes drifted toward the tent wall, where the wind made the fabric pulse like a slow heartbeat. "I miss the idea of it, not the place." Miller didn't push. She learned that about her sergeant. Eva answered what she wanted, and silence filled the rest. Instead, she said softly, "When I called my mom last week, she said she couldn't recognize my voice. Said I sounded older." Eva looked up, studying her. "You probably are." "I'm 20, Miller said, half smiling. "Yeah," Eva said quietly, "you won't be again." Outside, a vehicle door slammed. A voice shouted something indistinct. Then quiet again, always quiet again. Miller's eyes followed Eva's movements. "You really think it doesn't end?" Eva's hands didn't stop working. "War doesn't end. It just gets quieter until you start to believe it did." The words hit Miller harder than she expected. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, almost hesitantly, she said, "You ever been scared out there, really scared?" Eva's eyes flicked up. "Every time." "You didn't look like it." "That's the trick," Eva said, voice low. "You don't let fear see itself. If it does, it starts giving orders." Miller leaned back, thinking. "When that sniper started firing, I thought we were dead." Eva nodded slowly. "So did I." "But you didn't move." "Because he wasn't the only one bleeding." The way she said it, calm, deliberate, sent a shiver down Miller's spine. It wasn't arrogance, it was truth. Eva had accepted the trade a long time ago, fear for focus, safety for seconds. That was how you stayed alive long enough to keep someone else that way. The generator outside sputtered. The lights flickered for a heartbeat, then steadied again. Miller looked at the tent wall, the shadows shifting with every movement of the bulb. "Do you ever hear them?" she asked quietly. "Who?" "The ones you couldn't save." Eva didn't answer right away. She just stared at the open kit in front of her, at the rolled gauze she hadn't used tonight. Finally, she said softly, "You don't hear them, you remember them. The difference is small, but it matters." "How so?" "When you hear them, they haunt you. When you remember them, they teach you." Miller nodded, eyes damp but steady. "What if you remember too many?" Eva gave a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Then you start teaching yourself." They both sat in that quiet for a long while. The air smelled of coffee and antiseptic. The hum of the generator blurred into a dull rhythm, like a tired heartbeat that refused to quit. Eva finally leaned back, rubbing her temples. "You should sleep." "So should you." "I don't," Eva said. "Can't or won't?" Eva thought about it, both. Miller studied her for a moment. "What keeps you awake?" Eva's eyes flicked toward the wall, toward the direction of checkpoint 4. "The silence," she said. "It sounds too much like peace." Outside, a breeze picked up, making the tent flap ripple. For a moment, it sounded like someone walking past. Miller's shoulders tensed, then relaxed when she realized it was only the wind. Eva noticed. "You'll start hearing it too, every medic does. The footsteps that aren't there, the radio chatter that's long gone, the echoes stay longer than the people." Miller swallowed. "How do you stop it?" "You don't," Eva said. "You learn to live beside it." The younger woman looked down, her hand tightening on the coffee mug. "That sounds impossible." Eva's tone softened. "So did today." They sat like that for a while, two soldiers in the half-light, one who'd seen too much, one learning what that meant. After a long pause, Miller said, "You ever think about quitting, just walking away from all this?" Eva turned the question over in her mind. "Every day." "So why don't you?" Eva looked at her hands. the faint tremor that never really went away. Because I know what happens when I'm not there. Miller's voice dropped to a whisper. Someone dies. Eva nodded once. Someone always dies. The difference is whether they do it alone. The truth hung heavy in the air, heavier than the smell of dust or blood or coffee. Miller looked away, blinking fast. You really believe that, don't you? Eva's voice was soft now, almost a whisper. You don't have to believe it, you just have to live it. The generator clicked off for a second, plunging the tent into darkness. Both women froze. Then, with a cough and a groan, the lights flickered back on. Miller exhaled, laughing weakly. Even the power's tired. Eva gave a small smirk. Yeah, even the light gets scared here. Miller rubbed her face. I don't know how you've done this 3 deployments. I barely made it through one night. You will, Eva said. The trick is simple. What's that? Stop counting days. Start counting lives. Miller stared at her, the words sinking deep. Then she said quietly, You really think it makes a difference? Eva nodded. It's the only thing that ever does. A radio crackled faintly from the other room, background chatter indistinct. A name, a call sign, a sigh. The kind of static that filled empty space so the silence wouldn't win. Eva stood, rolling her shoulders. The exhaustion made her joints ache. You should get some rack time before the next run. You think there'll be another? There's always another. Miller frowned. You sound sure. Eva glanced toward the flap, where the desert night pressed against the canvas. War doesn't care if you're tired. It only cares if you're ready. Miller didn't argue. She just stood, hesitating by the door. You know, back at the checkpoint, when I saw you kneel in front of the sniper fire, I thought it was over. Eva looked at her. So did I. But you didn't stop. Eva's eyes softened. Because stopping means deciding someone else's fate for them. I wasn't ready to do that. Miller swallowed hard, then said, When I joined, I wanted to be brave. I thought it meant not being afraid. But after today, I think it just means doing it anyway. Eva gave a slow nod. That's it. Bravery's not the absence of fear. It's the refusal to let it make decisions for you. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Miller straightened her posture, saluted quietly, not regulation sharp, just respectful. Eva looked at her for a long second, then nodded. Go sleep, specialist. Yes, ma'am. And Miller. She turned. Next time, don't call me ma'am. Miller smiled faintly. Yes, Sarge. The flap closed behind her. The generator hummed on. Eva stood alone again, the weight of the night pressing down. She stared at the table, at the clean instruments laid out like trophies from a war no one would ever celebrate. Then she whispered to the empty room. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Outside, the desert wind carried her words away, soft, endless, forgotten by everyone but her. Why did it always hit her when the world went quiet? The bass had gone still again, the kind of still that made even the wind sound guilty for moving. The desert stretched endless under a moon that looked too clean for what it watched over. Inside her tent, Sergeant Eva Ristova sat on her cot, elbows on her knees, hands clasped tight. The hum of the generator was faint now, distant. Even the lights outside the compound walls looked softer tonight, like the whole place was holding its breath. Her boots were still on, they always were. Habit, she told herself, but truth was it wasn't habit, it was readiness. Because out here, sleep was the most dangerous thing you could do unarmed. She showered if rinsing dust off with cold water counted as that, but the blood still clung to her fingernails, faint and stubborn. She'd scrubbed until the skin turned red. It didn't matter. Some stains weren't meant to come off. Across the tent, her aid bag sat open again, half-packed this time. She couldn't seem to leave it alone. The weight of it was comfort. The weight of it was her. She reached inside and pulled out a small metal object. A flattened piece of dog tag, bent at the edge, burned faintly at one corner. The name was almost gone, melted smooth, just the faint outline of a letter, M. She turned it over in her palm, cold metal, cold memory. Outside, someone laughed far away near the comms tent. Then another voice joined, light, tired, human. She closed her eyes. For a moment she wasn't in Kandahar. She was somewhere else, then not now. Another outpost, another heat, another soldier calling her name. Rostova, medic. She'd been 28 then, second deployment, fresh stripes. The sun had been cruel that day, burning the air until it felt like glass. The ambush came out of nowhere, a single IED, then gunfire from the ridge. She could still hear the chaos, the screaming, the pop of rounds cutting the sky apart. And then him. Private Marcus Hale, 22, Southern accent thick enough to make every word sound like a story. He'd been hit in the neck just above the collarbone. She remembered the blood, how fast it came. How fast he went. She remembered pressing her hand to the wound, shouting for a tourniquet, shouting for anything. He looked up at her, eyes wide and terrified. Am I hit bad? She lied to him. She told him no. And when he stopped breathing, she'd kept talking anyway. Come on, Marcus, you're fine. Stay with me, you're fine. Her voice had cracked on the third fine. He died with her hand still on his throat. That was the last time she'd cried. Not because of him, but because of what came after. They'd loaded his body, zipped the bag, and before the dust even settled, she was treating someone else. No time, no space, no goodbye. That was war. It didn't give you room to break. It gave you another patient. The sound of the memory faded, leaving only the present, the faint hum of the night, and the weight of silence pressing against her ribs. Eva opened her eyes, staring at the dog tag in her hand. Private Marcus Hale, the first one she couldn't save, the one who made her who she was. She exhaled slowly, whispering to the quiet. You're still here, aren't you? No answer, there never was. The flap of the tent rustled, and Miller's voice came softly. Sarge, you awake? Eva slipped the tag back into her pocket. Yeah. Miller stepped inside, rubbing her arms. Powers down again. Feels like the whole place is holding its breath. Eva gave a faint smile. It's the desert. Even the wind knows when to shut up. Miller hesitated, studying her. You okay? Eva looked up at her, not the usual steel in her eyes, but something softer, worn thin. Define okay. Miller gave a small, sad laugh. You always say that. Because it's the only honest answer. Miller stepped closer, sitting on the edge of the cot across from her. I couldn't sleep. Too quiet. Yeah. Eva nodded. That's when it gets loud. Miller tilted her head. What does? The part you can't say out loud. The younger soldier studied her for a long moment. Then carefully she asked, you ever lose one, someone you couldn't save? Eva's hand stilled. Her thumb brushed over her palm, over the faint dent the dog tag had left in her skin. Yeah, she said softly, more than one. What do you do with that? How do you live with it? Eva looked past her, eyes distant. You don't, you carry it. And if you're lucky, it teaches you how to stop making the same mistakes. Miller leaned forward slightly. You think that's what this is all about, learning from what hurts? Eva gave a quiet, thoughtful hum. Maybe, or maybe it's just about not wasting the pain. They sat in silence for a while, the air between them thick with unspoken truths. The light outside flickered once, then steadied again. Somewhere far off, a convoy engine rumbled to life, soldiers heading out into the same night they'd just survived. Miller finally said, you ever think it's strange how we save people we don't even know, but sometimes can't save the ones we do? Eva's voice was calm, almost too calm. That's the cruel balance. The ones you know are the ones that break you. The ones you don't, they remind you why you still try. Miller nodded slowly, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I used to think courage was about not being scared," she said. Eva smiled faintly. "And now? Now I think it's about being scared and doing it anyway." Eva's smile deepened just enough to soften her face. "Then congratulations, you're starting to understand the job." Miller glanced toward the flap of the tent, where the faint breeze carried in the smell of sand and smoke. "You think we'll make it home?" she asked quietly. Eva didn't answer right away. Finally she said, "Everyone does, just not all at the same time." The words landed heavy. Miller looked at her sergeant, the woman who had faced sniper fire without flinching, who had carried bodies through flames, who had refused to run. And for the first time, she realized what that strength really cost. Eva leaned back, exhaling slowly. "You should get some rest. Big day tomorrow." "What's tomorrow?" "Same as today, just quieter until it is." Miller gave a faint smile and stood. "You'll wake me if we get another call." Eva nodded. "Always." The younger soldier hesitated by the flap. "You know, Sarge, if I ever end up half as good as you, I'll call that enough." Eva shook her head. "Don't be better." Miller smiled softly, then slipped out into the night. The silence returned. Eva sat there for a long time, staring at the faint line of light that crept under the tent flap. She reached into her pocket again, feeling the edge of the dog tag. The metal was warm now, shaped by her grip. She whispered, "I didn't forget Marcus. I never did." Her voice cracked just once, the sound of something breaking quietly, gently, in a place where no one could see. Outside, the wind shifted. A new sound joined it, the faint thump of distant rotors. Another medevac heading out into the dark. Eva listened, her eyes following the invisible sound. Another night, another mission, another set of names that hadn't been written yet. She stood, pulling on her jacket, and stepped outside. The cold hit her hard, that sharp desert chill that made every breath visible. The base lights shimmered faintly through the haze. Beyond them, the hills were black and endless. She walked toward the perimeter wall, boots crunching gravel. Each step felt heavier than the last. When she reached the fence, she stopped and looked out, past the wire, past the sand, into nothing. She spoke softly to the empty land. "You got your song after all, didn't you?" No one answered, but in her mind she could still hear him, Marcus Hale, laughing that easy, boyish laugh that didn't belong in war. The stars above Kandahar were sharp tonight, too many, too bright. She hated them for shining so easily. The radio in her vest crackled faintly, command chatter, background noise, another emergency forming somewhere else. She should have gone back inside. She should have rested. But instead she whispered, "Tell them I'm ready." She didn't mean ready for a fight. She meant ready for whatever came next, whether it was another rescue, another loss, or another ghost to carry. Because that's what medics did. They didn't get closure. They just kept going, one life at a time. One heartbeat after another. The wind moved again, carrying the faint echo of rotors until it disappeared into the dark. And as she turned back toward the base, her voice barely a breath. "Some of us aren't made to be saved. Some of us are made to save others and live with what that costs." Why did the new call feel like déjà vu? The alarm hit before sunrise. Not the shrill kind that made people panic. The short, deliberate tone that meant something had gone wrong somewhere close. Sergeant Eva Rostova was already awake. She'd never slept. She was sitting on her cot, boots laced, vest half-zipped, staring at her hands when the radio came alive. Guardian 2, possible ambush, route Echo 2. 2 casualties reported, 1 critical. Nearest medic team to respond. Her heart didn't spike. Not anymore, it just steadied. She grabbed her kit, slung it over her shoulder, and stepped out into the gray morning. The base was already moving, soldiers running, shouting, engines starting. The smell of dust and diesel filled the air. The sky was the color of unpolished steel, the kind of morning that promised heat and regret. Miller was waiting by the MRAP, helmet on, chin strap fastened too tight. Her eyes were alert, but her hands shook as she loaded her pack. Eva walked up beside her. "You ready?" Miller nodded quickly. "Yes, Sarge." Eva's gaze softened. "Slow it down. We move fast, not rushed." Miller nodded again, steadier this time. "Got it." They rolled out minutes later, convoy of 3, cutting through the narrow valley road. The radio crackled with static and broken updates. Convoy Alpha under fire. Grid coordinates locked. 1 vehicle disabled. Guardian 2, ETA 6 mics. Eva watched the landscape blur past brown hills, barbed wire, half-collapsed mud walls. The kind of land that swallowed sound and gave nothing back. Miller glanced over. "Sarge, what's the plan if we're still hot when we get there?" "Same as always," Eva said quietly. "You cover, I crawl." Miller frowned. "You mean we crawl?" Eva gave a faint smirk. "Let's hope we don't need to." The radio flared again, this time sharper. "Alpha 1 to command. We've got one trapped. Fire from the ridge we can't." Static swallowed the rest. Miller's hands clenched around the dash. "Trapped, that means." Eva's voice cut through. "Focus, we're almost there." They turned the final bend, and the world broke open. A convoy truck was burning in the center of the road, flames licking from the hood. Smoke curled into the sky. Bullets cracked against the dirt, snapping past the armored hull. Beyond it, 2 soldiers were dragging a third behind a shattered barrier, blood trailing through the dust. Eva's voice snapped sharp. "Miller, suppression left, I'm moving." Miller's face went pale. "Sarge, it's still active." "Exactly why we move now." Before Miller could argue, Eva was already outdoors swinging, boots hitting the ground hard. She moved low, fast, body hugging the earth, medkit bouncing against her side. The heat hit her face, smoke stinging her lungs. She could feel it, the same rhythm, the same chaos, the same impossible déjà vu. A round hit the dirt a foot from her hand. Another whizzed past her shoulder. She kept crawling, counting breaths instead of bullets. 3 breaths, 4, keep moving, he's still alive. She reached the wounded soldier, barely more than a kid. Blood soaked his uniform from the shoulder down. His leg was pinned under a twisted door panel. His breath came in shallow gasps. "I've got you," Eva said, voice calm. "Stay with me." He looked up at her, eyes wide, frightened. "Am I?" "You're fine," she lied, again. She pressed a dressing against the wound, feeling the blood pulse through her gloves. "I need extraction," she shouted over the radio. Miller's voice came back, shaky but clear. "Covering fire up, ridge going quiet." Eva wedged her shoulder under the door panel, straining to lift it enough to free his leg. It barely budged. The soldier groaned. I can't feel." "Don't talk," Eva said, "just breathe." Then faintly through the smoke movement, another shape running toward her. Miller. "Stay down," Eva barked. Miller ignored her, sliding in beside her, helping to lift the metal. Between them it shifted enough for the soldier to pull free. He screamed, pain ripping through the air. "Tourniquet," Eva said. Miller was already handing it over. She tightened it high and fast, checked for distal pulse. Nothing. Good. "Okay," Eva murmured. "We've got you. You're not going anywhere." The boy's face was pale now, his eyes glassy. Eva leaned close. "Hey, look at me." He blinked. "Tell me your name." "Ramirez," he gasped. "Private Ramirez." "All right, Ramirez. You're not dying today, you hear me." He nodded weakly, lips trembling. The sound of gunfire faded as the rest of the team secured the ridge. The air went eerily still again. Smoke and silence, the aftermath, always the aftermath. Eva and Miller carried Ramirez to the MRAP. She shouted for the stretcher, for saline, for air. Inside, the vehicle filled with the smell of blood and burned fabric. Eva's hands moved with mechanical precision. IV line, compression, oxygen mask. Miller held the bag steady. He's losing pressure. Then keep him talking, Eva snapped. To say what? Anything. Miller leaned close. Hey, Ramirez, you've got family waiting, yeah. He nodded faintly. A daughter. Miller froze. How old? 3, he whispered. Eva's voice softened. Then you're not dying here. She pressed harder, eyes fixed on the monitor as if she could will the numbers to hold. 30 minutes later, the medevac came. The dust storm of rotors washed over them, the bird landing rough but steady. Eva and Miller loaded Ramirez inside, their arms streaked with blood. The flight crew shouted over the noise, "You coming?" Eva shook her head. He's stable enough, you take him. The crew nodded and lifted off. As the helicopter rose, Eva watched it fade into the horizon, the same horizon where she'd lost Marcus Hale years ago. Same light, same smell, different name. Miller came up beside her, panting, hands still trembling. You did it again. Eva shook her head. No, we did. You saved him. Eva's voice was quiet, for now. They stood there, watching the sky fade back to stillness. The dust settled slowly, covering everything like a blanket that refused to hide the truth. Hours later, back at base, Eva sat alone by the fence line. Her gloves were off, her fingers raw. She stared at the dirt between her boots, still red in places. Miller approached, moving carefully, 2 mugs of water in hand. You okay? Eva didn't answer. Miller set the mug beside her and sat. You went quiet again. Did I? You always do after a save. Eva's eyes stayed on the ground. Because that's when it hits, the silence, the question you don't want answered. What question? If it was luck or mercy. Miller frowned. What's the difference? Eva finally looked at her. Luck doesn't care who you are, mercy does. The younger woman went still. You really think there's mercy out here? Eva sighed, looking out at the fading horizon. I think there's humanity, and sometimes that's close enough. The air grew cooler as the sun disappeared. Crickets chirped faintly from somewhere near the wire. The smell of sand and smoke lingered, old and heavy. Miller leaned her arms on her knees. You know, when I saw you run into that fire again, I thought she's going to break this time. Eva's mouth twitched into something almost like a smile. Maybe I did. Maybe that's what keeps me standing. Miller studied her face, the lines carved deep from years of fatigue, the quiet defiance in her eyes. What keeps you doing this? Eva's gaze softened. Because somewhere out there another Ramirez is waiting, another call coming, and someone has to answer. Miller nodded slowly. And if one day it's you? Eva looked at her, expression unreadable. Then someone else answers. For a long time neither spoke. The stars came out, one by one, sharp against the black. The war felt smaller under that sky, but only for a moment. Then Eva said quietly, You know what no one tells you about saving lives? Miller looked at her. It changes how you see your own. The younger soldier didn't reply. She didn't need to. The night stretched around them, endless, vast, and silent. Somewhere far off, the sound of rotors echoed again, another call, another beginning. Eva stood, slinging her bag over her shoulder. The same bag that had carried her through 3 tours, too many screams, and one truth that never left her. You can't save everyone, but you can damn sure try. As she turned back toward the lights of the aid station, Miller called after her. Sarge. Eva paused. What if one day, no one calls you for help anymore? Eva smiled faintly, the kind that carried both pride and sadness. Then I'll know I finally did my job. And with that she disappeared into the tent light, swallowed by the glow, steady as always, silent as mercy. Why did she feel calm when the sirens began again? It started just before dawn, that strange, hollow hour when the desert still holds the night, but the light's already coming. The kind of hour where soldiers either slept like the dead or stared at the ceiling waiting for the next call. Sergeant Eva Ristova was doing the latter. Her gear was packed, boots on the floor beside her cot, aid bag by the flap always ready. She learned long ago that rest was a luxury. Readiness was survival. The radio crackled once, twice, then. Guardian 2, this is command. We've got contact north of Highway Delta. Possible civilian casualties. Need immediate med response. That was all. No pause, no hesitation, just coordinates and need. Eva stood without a sound. The body moved before the mind. She slipped on her vest, cinched it tight, grabbed her kit. Outside, the base was still half asleep, the first gray hint of morning brushing against the horizon. The air was cold, too still. Miller jogged up behind her, still buttoning her vest. Another one. Eva nodded once. Civilians this time. Local or contractors. Doesn't matter. They climbed into the MRAP. The driver was already inside, young, nervous, hands too tight on the wheel. He didn't say a word, just started the engine. The convoy rolled out, tires grinding against sand and gravel. The world blurred into pale light and rising dust. Miller leaned forward, headset crackling. Command says small village north of the ridge, possible IED. Eva exhaled. Possible always means certain. You think it's a trap. Everything's a trap until it is. The words hung heavy inside the armored hull. 15 minutes later, they reached the village, a cluster of clay huts, one of them still smoking. The road was cratered, debris scattered. A truck flipped on its side, wheels still spinning slow. The silence was unnerving. No shots, no shouting, just wind and the faint sound of a woman crying somewhere nearby. Eva jumped out first, scanning the scene. Miller with me, driver hold position, eyes up. They moved fast, low, methodical, eyes scanning, weapons raised. The ground was littered with glass, burned fabric, shattered fruit from a market stall that would never open again. The crying grew louder. They rounded the corner and found her. A woman, mid-30s maybe, blood on her sleeve, clutching a child whose leg was twisted at an unnatural angle. Miller's breath hitched. Oh God. Eva was already moving, dropping to her knees beside them. Hey, you're safe now. We've got you. The woman looked up, terrified, speaking fast in Dari. Eva raised her hands, voice calm, gentle. It's okay. Doctor, doctor. She mimed bandaging, then pointed to the boy. The woman hesitated, then nodded, tears streaking her face. Eva opened her kit. Compound fracture femur, she muttered. No arterial bleed, he's shocky though. Miller handed her what she needed before she asked. Gauze, splint tape. The boy whimpered, breath short and shallow. Eva worked quickly, voice low and steady. You're okay, little man, you're okay. We've got you. And then she heard it. A sound she'd learned to dread, the faint metallic click buried under the dirt. Her eyes froze on the ground beside her left knee. A thin wire, half covered in sand, leading toward a dented oil drum against the wall. Pressure plate. She went still, every muscle locked. Her pulse didn't rise, it stopped. Miller saw her expression. Sarge. Eva didn't move. Don't move. What is it? Tripwire, my knee's on it. Miller's face went white. Oh no. Calm down, Eva said. Her voice was slow, even. Breathe. The woman didn't understand, but she saw the fear. She started to cry harder, clutching her son tight. Miller, Eva said, eyes still fixed on the wire. You need to take them slowly, move back the way we came. I'm not leaving you. That's an order. Miller's hands shook. Sarge, if you move. I know. For a long second, no one breathed. The desert was silent again. Then Eva spoke, voice calm but firm. Listen to me. You're going to take them to the MRAP. You're going to call EOD. You're going to make sure that kid lives. You understand? Miller's eyes filled with tears. I'm not leaving you here alone. You're not. You're just going to do your job. Miller hesitated, then nodded. Slowly, carefully, she reached for the woman's arm. The mother resisted at first, screaming in fear, but Miller spoke softly, guiding her away, step by slow step. When they reached the edge of the street, Miller turned back one last look. Eva gave her a small nod. Not goodbye, just go. And then she was alone. The wind picked up, brushing sand over the cratered road. Eva exhaled through her nose, slow and deliberate. She could see the faint glint of metal under the wire. Maybe an anti-personnel charge. Maybe worse. Her voice crackled on the radio. Command, this is Guardian 2.